What's up, Kingdom Dads? We are back.
We're back, man. I'm excited to be here. A great episode last week. Super excited about today's episode.
Yeah, man. The sun is out this morning. Man, guys, I'm so pumped to talk to you guys this morning. I'm joined by Nate, as always, Willie T in the back without a microphone. He got a little carried away on the last episode, so we took his microphone back away.
He did, man. He couldn't stop talking there. I think he got a little power rush.
I like it. A little confidence boost. That's good. That's what I want to see. But man, I'm excited to introduce you guys to just an incredible father, man, great friend of mine, Jim Schreiner. Man, I'm glad you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. It's appreciated. Thank you for the compliments.
So guys, you'll hear, I've referenced growth through my relationship with Jim many times, probably through this podcast already. I'm pretty confident in. Jim and I have known each other, 6 years now, I think. Like a lot of people at the church that we are a part of, when you ask them, hey, how'd you find out about this place, or how'd you get the invitation? They'll say, oh, Jim invited me. And Jim is one of those guys, he tends to know everybody in the community, not by accident, but through just really incredible intentionality. And I've watched him walk that out, and he's taught me a ton about that over the years. We've been involved in men's ministry together. I'm good friends with pretty much your whole family, his incredible wife, and one of his two sons, Drew, who you'll probably see on here at some point also. Yeah. So, Jim, why don't you...
I would watch. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That one would be a good one to watch. There might be some editing in there.
That's what I was going to say. No telling where we would go, but man.
Podcast gone wild.
You may have.
Jim, why don't you just take a couple minutes, tell us a little bit about you, your background.
Okay. I'm been in Tennessee 40-something years. We got married. A month later, moved here to Tennessee, but we're both from Kentucky. I grew up, my dad was a minister, grew up in a church. So I've had Bible thoughts, theology, whatever you label it as, pretty much all my life. When we got here, I actually came here to do youth work at a church, did that for 4 years, and then got ready to get back into teaching. My wife was getting into teaching, and it dawned on me, it put us on the both same schedule. When we started having kids, I would be on the schedule with my kids. So I did middle school here in Sumner County. I did it for right at 30 years and loved every minute of it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. I love that age. I always said, you better love that age or don't be there. I remember as a middle schooler what I was like, what you guys were like probably, but I did. I loved being there. And, I think that's where God wanted me, to be honest, because between my first and second year of college, I took 5 years off to learn a lot of things I didn't want to do.
Sure.
That's how I look at it. I mean, I did a lot of different jobs, and I tell people I didn't have a car payment. I didn't have a steady girlfriend, so I didn't have any financial commitments. And if I went in one day and wanted to quit, I quit and found the next job.
Yeah.
So.
Man, I actually think that's a really wise model that I wish we'd see more often. I've told a lot of young guys out of high school, I'm like, God, if I could just say, hey, Andrew, don't go to college for a few. Go to work some jobs and figure out what you like and don't like before you go spend $100,000 on a degree. If you even need one, go do that first.
And I had parents over the years who would 4 years later say, well, he's graduating, but he doesn't know what he wanted to do. And I always related, and I would always say to him, that's okay.
Yeah.
Just don't let him hang out in your basement. Make him get a job.
Yep.
Make him do something, But I actually went one August, woke up. I was living back home with my parents. They had 8 acres, and they were older, and I was helping take care of it. And I got up and I said, Dad, I'm going back to school. And I went in and I was doing construction at that time of all things, and said, this is my last day. Next day, I headed up to junior college where I had left and get back in the swing of it. Yeah,
man, that's such good advice. I know for me when I was starting out, right, like there's a lot of pressure, like get your feet grounded somewhere and start growing, right? Get to the next level, and it comes from a young age, right? Like how many kids out there, and not knocking if this is one of your kids, or like how many kids out there are starting in a sport at 3 years old, 4 years old, and it's like, we got to start them early if we want them to be competitive, and so sometimes you feel like you just got to pick a direction and go, and if that's not the right direction, sometimes you don't always feel confident, or maybe even feel like you have the support to change and really get down the path, or something I've been struggling with is like sometimes you can stop just full speed ahead in the direction you think is right. Sometimes God's asking you to just like, hey, buddy, hold on a little bit. Let's take a step back. I'll get you there, and I'll get you there in my time. You know, we talked about an episode coming up called God's Timing.
Yep.
But man, it's so hard to really have faith in that sometimes, really, and
it's
not
scary.
listen to the world around you or compare yourself to the person that's continually growing in their career and leaps and bounds.
And I think since the 80s, even maybe, you know, our culture has puts young couples, young families into that. You know, why isn't your kid in sports? Why isn't your kid taking dance? Why?
Yes.
You know, why isn't your kid just staying home and playing every day?
Yeah.
You know, we need to ask that question maybe. And I think that's coming back a little bit over the years. Yeah. But you're right. When a 4-year-old's got a full uniform, a lot of times by middle school, he's done with uniforms. You know?
Yeah, oh, man. I hate the travel ball stuff that it's turned into. We know a lot of families, right, that they're every night of the week something, and I'm like, we won't. I tell our girls, I'm like, we can pick one thing that you want to be good at and commit to, and that thing can change. As you see fit, but we're doing one thing, and the other time we're going to prioritize family meals, and that's one thing I love about Drew, your son, who's a good friend of mine, that he has talked to us a ton about his intentionality around even sports practice with Zane, Hiram Zane, I think he goes by his son. And around, hey, you can do this, but we're not prioritizing practice over Sunday church. And he's talked about that a lot. He also gives, I love it because, you know, college football is huge down here in the South. Nothing against college football. I don't watch it. I'd rather weave a basket. I do watch
college
a lot
football
of
fan here.
Yeah, I do watch a lot of motorsports and NASCAR. But, you know, we give the guys in group a hard time a lot because God forbid you play in a men's event when UT's playing. And it's like, because they ain't going to come.
It'll be crickets.
And, hey, that's to each his own. But
and that's a part about it that I always saw was travel teams, and I had family members that did that with their boys. But it's a weekend, and people my age will probably remember back, teams didn't practice on Wednesday night because churches met on Wednesday. That was youth group night. And when they started getting into that, and then, you know, it's evolved to where our culture subtly has tempted us to pull away from, you know, that gathering. So,
absolutely.
That's good. Jim, so you don't know about this segment, but we officially had it voted on this past week on what to name this funny segment of the show. We posted some names, and What the Dad stood strong. 60% of voters said, we want to keep What the Dad.
That's what it is.
So there you go. I guess the question has passed us now.
It's done.
Now, if I can think of anybody with funny dad stories, being the father of one Drew Schreiner, who you've got to have some. So just to give you some context on Drew again, just last week he was coyote hunting out of a helicopter. He's a strong-willed
and wild pigs.
He's like the Marlboro man that loves Jesus but doesn't smoke anymore.
That's fair description. I think he would stand by that.
I think he'd probably be proud of that. You're welcome, Drew.
I was going to say, if he comes to a podcast, he may be packing when he's coming.
He probably will be. I love it. You got anything funny about raising?
You know, if I took time to really think about a lot of things, there was a lot of fun raising my boys. One that comes to mind with What the Dad kind of thing, because I can almost see him saying that. 20 years ago, we were in another house, and, you know, he was in his teenage years, and he got into weightlifting and all that stuff. And, you know, boys will always try to challenge their dads and physically take them. And growing up, I taught my boys how to wrestle. You know, we would wrestle all the time. And we were in the kitchen one day, and his strength was starting to show. So I'm thinking I can be smarter than he is strong. And I look on the counter, and there's this bowl of tomatoes, and I just picked one up, and just a huge one. I just crushed it on the side of his head. And my wife was standing over, and she just, like, her eyes got like that. And I can almost see his look on his face was kind of like, what did you just do? You know,
what just happened?
Seeds went into the dining room. They went throughout the kitchen. They were everywhere. I mean, it stopped it. I won. I figured I won that round.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
But they still laugh about that at times.
That's funny.
It was a nice tomato, too. It was big. It was
That's
right
funny.
upside his head.
I love
So,
it.
dude, I can imagine if I did something like that with my son now, man. I would be trying to figure out a way to tell him, buddy, you can't throw fruits and vegetables across the house. And he'd be like, well,
and you got to explain it to your wife, too. I told her later, I said, I had to just come up with something.
Yeah.
Because he had gotten me in a hold I couldn't get out of, and I
Grabbed a tomato.
got creative.
Well, and, I remember
funny.
the first time I met Drew said immediately a ton about you as his dad, because it was when it was 8 years ago or so. We were moving into our second house. Kelly and I were 7 years ago, I guess. We were moving out of our second house into our third house. And I had posed in the men's group, hey guys, I really don't want to hire movers. We weren't in a financial place at the time to like spend $1,000 extra bucks on moving labor. Can anybody come help us move? I got a box truck for my work, and man, several guys showed up, but I'll never forget, Drew showed up, and he and I had never met, but it was him and his son, and he said, hey, my dad is Jim, and he told me you guys were looking for some help to move, and I was like, dude, are you kidding me right now? And he was
awesome.
The best help we had all day, because Drew's like a rhino. He's a weightlifter. He's huge.
Throw it on my back. I got it.
He carried our massage chair up to the third floor of our new house, I
Nice.
think by himself.
Yeah.
And he worked all day, and his son Zane helped us the whole time.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that is unheard of. Like for that kind of just character to come, and the character was evident. I was like, he's got good parents for sure. I didn't know Jim that well at the time.
I sort of remember that because I remember, I don't know if I couldn't be there or something. Maybe it was after one of my shoulder surgeries.
Yeah, it was. That's right.
And I think what I told him was, I can't do it physically. Do you mind going in my spot or something? And he was open and did it.
Yeah, showed up.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And we've done that a bunch since then.
Yeah.
We've moved a lot of people since then.
Yeah, it really speaks to why we wanted to have you on this podcast of talking about role models. It's a bit easier to walk in the community, right? During the day, you interact with people, you really want to be the leader, but it's easy to come home and you feel that exhaustion, right? You're tired and maybe you're not always the leader you want to be behind closed doors, but based off what Drew said and just knowing you as a person, I think you definitely met that bar of being the leader that God's called us to be as a father behind closed doors. And it's very evident that you've done an awesome job at that.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we want you here, right? To speak to us and to speak to the listeners.
Yeah.
Like, it is okay to get angry. It's okay to feel exhaustion behind closed doors. It's okay to have that outlet, but how do you manage that in a responsible way and still be the father that God's called you to be?
Tell us a little bit about Jim. So I know you mentioned you grew up, I think your dad was a pastor, you said. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with your dad, maybe your grandpa, who your role models have been.
I had 4 grandparents. I knew one. And that was a grandmother, and she died when I was 8. So I really didn't grow up with grandparents. My dad was German descent. His grandparents actually came over from Germany. They're on Ellis Island. We found the names up there and all that. So it's kind of cool. But
Wow.
My dad was that generation, knew a little bit about a lot of things. I wish I'd have listened more at times. But my dad became a Christian when he was early 20s. And, as he grew into that, he probably was ahead of himself in that time period there in Louisville in the 60s and all, as far as where he was in the scriptures and what he understood about them. And I learned this later from listening to people. My dad died in 80 of cancer. So after the fact, I kind of heard other people talking about him. So I he was a role model in my image. The one thing that I remember is he had a chair in the living room and there were books on both sides. And that's where I remember him studying. I have a chair at home now that Brad tells me, I gave you a place to put your books. Can you not keep them there? So I'm finding myself doing the same thing. Got books everywhere as I'm sitting there reading. I saw him get mad. I saw him relate to other people. I don't think I looked at him at that time as, this is my role model. I want to be like my dad. I don't think I ever saw that or lived that way. I don't have anybody in my life as such like that, I don't think, where I want to be like you someday. But when I think about it, for example, we had a barn built one time, all the boys in the neighborhoods, because it was a neighborhood where everybody's mom was everybody's mom. You ate at everybody's house. We're all sitting there eating. And the barn, brand new barn, was leaking, and we heard Dad in there on the phone. And by the way, that was a landline. He was tethered to the but he was so mad. I mean, he cussed this guy out. Now, everybody sitting at that table knows Dad's a minister.
Yeah.
We just started eating like, okay, don't say anything, just eat, Probably 10 minutes later, we heard him go back, call that guy up, and apologize.
Mm.
And that's the stuff that sticks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, like I say, I know he loved the Lord. I know he loved us. But I saw the stress on him, financial, what people do in ministry, how they just drain people, they whatnot. But yeah, I had a great set of parents and great childhood. So,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, he was a good man.
And in talking about being a role model and the role model you are, right? I mean, I know you don't just set out like you want to be your son's role model, but you don't necessarily set out thinking like, oh, how can I be the best role model today? A lot of times we're just being the man that God's called us to be.
Yeah.
And so, refer to that a little bit. Was that kind of your approach? Was your goal just to be the man God's called you to be and hope your son falls in line? Or how did you approach that as a father?
I think one thing that helped me, and I'm glad God showed me this early on, in that period, I didn't get married till I was 29. I probably would not have been a good dad at 20 years old. Most of the friends people I graduated with got married right out of high school, kind of thing. So I had to grow up in a lot of ways, probably,
Sure. Yeah.
Plus, I got tired of dating. It was one of those things where I had to find what people will say, find yourself first, find what you want. But I always do believe that God was leading me in that sense. I had actually gotten mentally to the point, if I don't ever get married, I can live with that, and then, God introduced me to my wife, and, I think he blessed me with a woman he knows I needed, and, we butt heads sometimes, but when I look over 40 something years of marriage, I tell her almost every day, I'm glad we're together.
Yeah.
Man, for just on that, so you guys don't know Brad. She is incredible. Her and I have the same temperament, I think. So I relate to her very well, but she is a strong-willed, she's principal, superintendent, right?
And now she has this store, and and I'll tell everybody, if you don't know her, she's named after her grandfather. And yes, we've had a lot of fun with that over the last 40 years,
I bet you have.
When we got married, back then you had matchbooks and napkins and all with your names on it. And the company that her parents were dealing with, like 2 or 3 times, they kept sending it back. You've misspelled this name or something. Surely it couldn't be Jim and Brad, 40 years ago, that's what it was. But
I love it.
That's funny.
But yeah, I don't know, in answer to your question. I don't think I ever had it in my mind, someday I need to be this for my children or anybody else. I carry a thing in my wallet, and I found it years ago. It's a little quote on a little piece of newspaper, and I cut it out and laminated it. And it says, integrity needs no rules. And I know that's not biblical, but that, I don't know, that just really said something to me. There's something about, and I'll admit, I've not always been an integrity kind of guy.
Sure.
Like we all have to learn and grow in it. But
Absolutely.
Those are the kind of mindsets that I think for whatever reason, that's what led me and kept me going in areas,
I think that's helpful because I know one thing that many of us who are in the throes of the very involved season as a dad with young kids right now, I question regularly, like, am I doing this right? Because I want to be a role model. I want to raise the kids up to where they see me as the way that, Drew sees you, and a healthy father. And I feel like all 3 of us who have young kids right now could probably ask that regularly.
Yeah.
And to hear you say, like, man, I didn't set out to be a role model necessarily. I set out to follow God's way and to continually sharpen my character, and for that to be my beacon.
Yeah. And I think that's, as I tried to look back and put it into words, honesty. I wanted to be honest in front of my kids. As we started, Drew was born in 1985, and we'd been married about 4 years, I guess. So at that point, I was in my early 30s, and I was excited about being a dad. But I always wanted to be honest because I remember how honest I saw my dad.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
good.
I remember the traits. I see those traits in me. You know, that German background, little temper every now and then that explodes.
Yeah,
You know,
happens.
the other thing that I wanted to instill once I started being a dad was I wanted to say to them when it got down to the nuts and bolts, I'm saying this because this is what the word says. Not because my dad said it or because I said it, but if I can go back and say, for example, James 4, in James, the book of James, it says, for him that knows to do good and doeth not, it's sin.
Yep.
So when those talks came about, Dad, what's sin, or what, how do I know what's right? You can take it back to that.
Yeah,
James said, or Peter said, and then it's on them,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's on those
absolutely.
guys,
That's a good point.
because, my kids have heard me cuss. They've heard me get mad, when they were little, and I had to apologize in front of them. So I think the honesty was always there.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I know I missed opportunities too. I mean, but we all do. So
Yeah, and just elaborating a bit off of some of what you said along the way there. Going back to my story in episode 2 of really having a challenge to connect with my son early on. The improvement of that didn't necessarily come from me trying to go out of my way to connect more, right? The improvement came from me working on myself, from my challenges, from my time in the Word and my time with God, and learning the man that I needed to be. And in turn, those things around me started to just naturally develop and grow.
yeah.
And in the midst of it, like, you're not sure what you're doing, but looking back, it's so clear. Something we've talked about a lot in our couples group, is working together as a team, husband and wife, right? And it's easy to hold each other accountable for what you think they should be doing, right? Especially those initial, when you first get married, like, this is what I think, this is what you should be doing, this is who I thought you were, and really, if you haven't taken the time to work on yourself and get yourself to the point to where you need to be, how can you hold somebody else accountable? Yeah. And then how can you grow with somebody else if you're not ready to grow yourself?
Yeah.
And so all of that, and even I think what you said is really just your focus, and my focus was reflecting on me, my relationship with God, and my values as a person, and then letting those things that I craved around me to develop from that and grow off of that.
And one of the things that I know that my dad, his favorite verses was out of Proverbs 3:5-7, where it talks about trusting the Lord with all your heart. And some versions, don't lean on your own understanding. One version is don't think you know it, or what you think you know, show that. And so I have always, probably that's a background verse. I knew it was important to him. There's 2 others that recently, and probably was like this when I was raising those boys, but if you look in Proverbs, and I think it's 30, and then even in Psalms 23, where David says, give me this day my daily bread. And that daily bread can be financial, it can be physical, it can be spiritual. It covers a lot, but it's about today. And we were able to take trips with our kids, but I wasn't a big golfer. I saw guys that I grew up with that, they went off and did their hobbies, and mom kept the kids. And I didn't want to do that. But again, would I have done that when I was 20? Maybe so,
Sure.
Because in those days I played a lot of ball.
Yeah.
So maturity comes with it. Age comes with it, but you can't go back. So you just start where you are now. If you're dealing with something, make your wife and then the kids the focus, and see where God takes you on that.
We've talked about it a little bit. I know Tanner and I have specifically talked about this because I remember having a conversation with you 5 or 6 years ago around finances and prioritizing, putting money away and different things. And I remember you told me, be responsible and think about your future, but don't be so focused on that you don't have some fun today and take trips with your family, enjoy your day.
Absolutely.
And that spoke a ton to me, because there's so many voices saying the other thing. I'm like, just stock away money, put away money.
Yeah.
And I've talked about, like, I watched my mom save her whole life and work her whole life and then die before she ever even got to retirement. And I feel like that's very common.
Yeah. You know, it's a joke that we would have from time to time. So I'm a physical therapist, right? And working with people, you know, it would come up that, you know, they call it your golden years because you save up all your money so you can spend it at the doctor's office, right? And so, you know, that's a good point where we have these grand visions of the future and what our expectations are for our end game. But, you know, truly we don't know. And so living to be the person you're called to be, you know, enjoying time with your family, not putting a restriction on yourself and saying, if I get this or if I get that, man, that's such a lie we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, if this happens, I'll do this, you know, but
I was talking
now,
to a guy
you know?
about this past week, and he's at a point, he's talking about having joy, and he's, you know, and he's trying to get it across to his adult kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's not joy because you got this. It's not joy because now I'm doing this. The joy has got to be in here. Yeah. I may be doing this, I may own this, but the joy is still in here. Because what if I lose that? Well, do you lose your joy, you know? And so I thought it was interesting that he was talking and trying to get that across to his grown kids. You know, they're not married, and you know, they're still searching, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a fun way to look at it, exciting way, or whatever. And as I thought about this today, I think having a future hope is also a key ingredient.
Oh, for sure.
You know, if we're Christians, do we really believe what the Word says? And, you know, the Lord's coming back. He's going to take us all home, all this and everything. The phrase someday he may use is, well done, thou good and faithful servant. And one of the things that I remember my dad talking about or showing us in some way was, even if nobody's looking, are you willing to stop and pick that paper up off the sidewalk? Mm-hmm. You know, would you throw that trash away? Would you, this needs to be, Mom missed this. Would you do that? Even if nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
And I've always thought about that. And subtly, I think if you let your kids see you do that, you know, it's just
huge.
the little things.
I mean,
it's the little things. If nobody else sees, you're aware that God's watching you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So
one of the things I want to circle back to, and we've talked about this a lot with our listeners already around leadership and leading in your home and the husband's role, but one of the things that we wrote down to discuss with you when thinking about this show is, and I think you're a great example for it because you do have a strong-willed, very capable, confident wife who could very well lead. She's led schools. She's led a lot of things. I personally watch her lead very well.
Tries to lead the house.
Tries to lead the house. That's right. So that's what I want to ask you about. How, a young Jim Schreiner early on in marriage, how was that dynamic and how did you grow through that over the years, leading as the husband?
And again, I'm 29 when I got married, so I'd already learned myself a little bit. But
Brad's ears, by the way, she's probably listening to this.
Yeah, and that's okay because
I
think she's the kind of woman that God knew I needed.
Yeah.
I didn't want somebody that just always hung on my arm.
Yeah.
Dated those,
Yeah.
in a very short period of time. I think one of the things that I really appreciate about the woman that God gave me, Brad, is because she does have that in her, but through our years of marriage, we've learned to talk about things, to discuss things. And then to be quite honest, we're like a lot of families. When our kids got older, we found, okay, we're further apart than we realized. I've always been an optimistic kind of guy. I ended up going to counseling, marriage counseling. And I never would have said I would have done that. I mean, I didn't need it,
Sure.
But what we learned in that was we quit communicating. And that's one thing I've said to other couples before is make sure you're communicating. Take time to communicate, So I appreciate the fact that she's a go-getter, And one of the things in our marriage, for example, we've both agreed on, not even verbally, but we just know, like if you and I were talking and you told me something in confidence, she's okay with me not telling her that.
Yeah.
And vice versa. We've both been in points in our life where, without communicating to the other one, hey, this person's in need. I'm bringing them to the house.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see you when I get there. Not can I bring them to the house? It's just this, and I so much appreciate that in so many ways we are on the same page.
Mm.
The stuff we're off the same page on, it's out there.
Sure. But when you get to the stuff that really matters,
what matters,
having
most,
the love, having the trust, right? Building that communication on the front end. It's like you build that trust ahead of time, right? If she's trying to build trust because she's bringing somebody to your house, it's probably not the best time to build trust. If you're in the midst of an action, but working on that
and
ahead
do
of
your
time.
kids see it.
And
I think that is something, as I think back on it. One of the things, I'm not sure who I learned, maybe my dad or whatever, but or in classes, if my wife said something to the boys, I backed her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
you
vice
got to be on
versa,
the same page.
And even if we disagreed, we would talk about it later. And another thing is, I knew, which my wife and Drew.
Yep.
And man, they butted heads.
Yeah, man, I can't.
So
imagine.
I knew which battles to step into.
I can't even imagine. We still hear stories from Drew regularly.
So I learned what battles to step into.
Yeah.
And then she learned what battles, for me, mine weren't as many maybe, because I dealt with the boys differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Drew tells us a story of where I think he was skipping school maybe in high school at some point, and Brad called his principal and was like, Drew's skipping school today.
She came home and found him at home. Yeah.
Yes, and got him suspended. Like, your mom called and told the principal on you.
Yeah.
Funny.
And see, and we've talked about, if I had caught him, I wouldn't have called the principal. And over the years, I would say to her, look, I get him. I was like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a rule follower. Drew and I maybe didn't always follow the rules,
Sure.
So, but it's learning how to help each other out through this child-rearing time. And I think that's how the kids learn. I had a friend, and he told me he never saw his parents fight. And I thought, wow, then how do you know how to fight with your wife?
Mm-hmm.
It's a great point.
Yeah. And it was, but I was just surprised.
And that's where, we talked about anger a little bit. The person commented about anger, and we dived into handling anger a little bit on the last episode. And, that's a great point. How is your kid going to learn how to deal with anger if you never demonstrate anger in front of them, or arguments or frustration? Like, all those things are normal emotions that we need to learn how to deal with and control, and then pass that on to our kids.
Yeah. And it may be something from work. I remember one time Barrett, my younger son, came home, and he went to Merrill Hyde. Brad was the principal, he down there with her, and there was a bully that picked on him all the time. And finally one day I just said, okay, next time he does it, hit him. And he said, well, I might get suspended. I said, yeah, we'll deal with that when it comes. But that's going to stop him or stand up to him in some way. And, guys, he did. Now, he didn't have to hit him. Because then I would have to explain to Brad, well, that was kind of my idea, But what he found was, when he stood up to that bully, the kids around him all jumped on his side, and they all stood up to him.
Yeah.
But so I think that's part of this. How do you deal with real life?
Man, this has been like the theme of our year, as Hannah, our oldest, is in second grade. We've dealt with bullying a lot this year. And, at first it was like, how do we stop the bullies?
Yeah.
After a while, we realized you're never going to stop the bullies in life. But what we can do is empower her with the skill set to diffuse conflict and to take their power away.
Yeah.
So that it no longer has power over her. And we have taught her that over the last 6 months consistently, and
good.
Man, it works.
Yeah.
Because once you don't feed into it, they stop bullying you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I used to tell Drew especially, if you won't want to get in trouble in school, then sit on the front row.
Yeah.
Learn to manage the situation, because you can't change it. But how do I get through that? And my point to him, and even the eighth graders when I used to teach, was, someday you're going to get a boss that doesn't like you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a hard time dealing with. You can't change the boss. If you want the job, what do you have to do?
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you can find verses in the Bible to reinforce that, to show your kids, okay, let's pray about this. I know of a young couple, And every morning, they have 2 children in elementary school. She's a teacher. Every morning during the week, before they leave that house, they got their backpacks on and they stand in and they pray together.
It's good.
I didn't do that with my kids, but if I had to do over, I would have liked to think I would have done that if I'd have thought about it. So yeah, because you got to teach them how to deal with the situations.
Yeah. And going back to leaning on Bible verses, we talked about mission statements a little bit, and really, like, if you don't have a set of core values and a mission statement, what are you going to fall back on? I've always been one to think like, I'm a good person. I don't have to take aside time to write these things down, or my wife and I, maybe even a couple of years ago now, we're like, we need a family mission statement. We'll get it. We'll put it on a picture or something and hang it up. And so, still working on that family mission statement. So I could use some encouragement or some accountability from listeners and you guys to make us get that done. I almost brought one
in. Brad found ours the other day.
Yeah, awesome.
We actually did that. It hung on the refrigerator.
Yes.
And it says our goals for our family, for the boys. And beside it was one of the things that she did with both boys was you could pick 3 foods that you never had to eat.
I like that.
No matter where we were, if she picked it.
I remember you telling us that.
And so that hung there. I think they still have a copy of that somewhere.
Dang.
But that mission statement thing, especially if they understand why you're doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd encourage you to do it, man. Put it on the refrigerator because it also keeps you in mind of what am I modeling here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Life's
not easy. Decisions aren't easy, right? Yeah. And if you don't have something that's simple sometimes just to fall back on, a set of core values or a family mission statement, like, it can really make some of these decisions tough, and even referencing that, you referenced James, right? And so something I'm really starting to lean into is Bible application for life, right? I mean, because in general, the Bible is a handbook for life, right? Like, it plays out scenarios, it gives you examples, it's very clear on how to live, and I mean, you even referenced leaning on James at times, when you're working through things with your family. I mean, so looking back, would you agree with that? I mean, any challenge you have in life, reflect on what the Bible says about it and use that as your guide, like the handbook for life.
And I do. And I would say, because I grew up in a church family, I grew up with a minister, I heard Bible a lot. Mm-hmm. I used to memorize the Bible verses at camp just so I could win the prize.
Yeah.
But many of those still stick in my head,
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what's your favorite book in the Bible?
Andrew, you gave me that one ahead of time, and I still don't know. Right. I love to study prophecy, so I do enjoy Daniel. Mm-hmm. But if you would hold a gun to my head right now and said, pick a book, I don't really know what I'd say.
Yeah, we just did a 8-week study on Daniel, and it was really good.
Yeah, it's
great.
There's so much in it, but
yeah.
I know your son's favorite book is Job, and we're about to dive into a study on that.
Job's
next,
a good one. Yeah.
I've got to give Jim and Brad really some credit here. We were in Florida the end of the year last year, just hanging out with the in-laws, and I can't remember what exactly we were doing. But my son was just sitting on the couch with us, and I meant to look at this verse before I left so I could say it correctly, but I believe it was a verse from Ephesians. He said, "Be kind to one and another." Is what we were like, what is that? And then, of course, he tried to say Ephesians, but I can't even remember how it came off. But I was like, wait, what did you say? And then we immediately were like, say it again, let's record it. And we recorded it, and we sent it to Jim to share with Brad, because, I mean,
I remember we got that.
Yeah, it's so awesome, right? Like, does he really know what it means at this age? Maybe at some level, but maybe not. But like you said, you start to really, really interpret these as you get older. As you step into situations you don't even know you're going to step into, these things pop in your head, and you're like, oh, that's what that means.
And what they know is, what kids know is, the Bible's important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
And at some point, and again, I know it doesn't always happen that way. I've got a friend that meets in our group on Tuesday, and he's got 2 grown children, and he that's his broken heart.
Yeah.
They have walked away. They just don't care about their faith. So it happens.
Yeah.
But that plan is still there. That root is still there. So
I think too, when you have a foundation for your family and you're able to talk to your kids about hey, why we act certain ways and why we don't do certain ways. We talk to our kids openly about the ways of the world versus the ways of the kingdom, and they know there's a different way that God calls us to act that is not in line with the way the world says it's okay to act. They know that at a very young age. And when we say certain things, it's not then, well, that's dad's rule.
That's
like,
right.
this is the way that God calls us to live, babe.
That's
So this is not me making this list of rules and principles.
Yeah.
Like,
And that's the bottom.
yeah, it helps so much.
It's really good. So as we wrap up, one more thing I want to hear from you. So now that you're in your retirement years, is there anything that you would want the younger 30, 35-year-old Jim, just if you could go back and just tell them like one really strong piece of advice to I was going to say change their direction, but you ended up on a great direction. But just help influence them to get there faster.
Nate, the one thing and the first thing that comes to my mind is, because I would have been in my early 30s raising kids, I would say to myself, go back to those verses about give me today. Because I'm like everybody, so many others. I was busy with my work. In the summers, I did work camps. I'd be 12 different places around the summer in the country in the summers. I was busy.
Yeah.
Even though I deliberately made time for my kids, I think my mindset was still that I got to do. I'm the provider. I would hope I would go back to more of, again, Proverbs 30, give me today. I think it actually says there's two things I ask. Number one, don't let me be a liar. And number two, give me what I need, neither too rich nor too poor. That mindset, I think, would bring more peace through some of that hectic time.
Really good.
And
that's good.
Yeah. So,
well, I know, today's episode is all about leaving a legacy. And I know there's not one thing that we called out specifically or, hey, if you do this, you'll leave a legacy, or this is what it takes. But what I do hear is a theme of intentionality in everything that you do and everything you talk about with your wife, your kids, your family, your word reading, and just being very intentional with your compass pointed in the right direction, which is obviously on God.
Well, I was just, when you said that, and we joke about this now, but Brad used to tell me that when my boys would get mad at me and they'd come in and they're unloading on her, well, Dad always brings the Bible back into it. So as I think back on that and we laugh about it, it got through, I guess, So I was doing something maybe at least partway right. But that was part of their argument that, he'll just bring up the Bible again.
I love it. That's good.
So,
man. Well, my friend, you have been an awesome friend to me, and just a great mentor and father-like figure. I know we want to have you back on soon. Jim is incredibly, has a great understanding and a lot of experience with the history of the Bible, scrolls, I
do like that.
All of that kind of stuff. Has been to Israel. So, we want to have you back on to talk about that.
I'd love to, and can I say this real quick? You guys inspire me. And when I say you guys, I feel very blessed that God has put people like you in my life. You're young. You're in that age group. You've got the physical strength to move people now, But more than that, I see where you all are in your faith and what you're trying to do with your families. And it's like God is saying to me, I'm not ready for you to get out of the game, but I've got new players coming up. He once told Elijah, he said, I got 7,000 haven't bowed the knee yet to Baal. And that, as I look through this and watch you guys, and it encourages Brad and me both. We talk about this periodically.
Thanks for that.
So thank you all.
Helpful, man. That's good stuff. Well, Nate, you want to pray us out today, my friend?
Absolutely.
All right.
God, thank you for this moment. Thank you for what I've personally learned through this podcast. Lord, thank you for Tanner and Andrew, and thank you for Jim and his influence on us, Lord. Be with us as we go about our day to day, and our listeners as they go about their day to day. And I know we discussed a lot on here, and it's not about taking it all in and getting it all right. it's about what can you do to take a step in the right direction? What can you do to take a step down the path that God's called you to walk on? So, Lord, be with our listeners, support them, help them grow. Be with us, support us, help us grow. And in your name I pray.
Amen.
Amen. Men, thanks for tuning in again today with another episode of Kingdom Dad. Be sure to catch us on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, or any of the popular podcast platforms.
Yeah, please like, subscribe, and comment. We want to hear from you guys. We want to go on this journey together. Share with your friends and get other guys you know involved.